What's up, folks? My name is Matthew, aka EZBOT. We're back with another live stream. Today we're going to discuss the differences between the Octatrack, the Digitakt II, and the Tonverk. If you were here a few seconds ago, this stream went live for like 30 seconds before I caught it. I was not ready yet, but I am now. Not all my cameras were set up. What I really want to discuss is what is the application for each of the Elektron samplers. The Elektron samplers are all unique, but they all share a lot of similar properties. They have the same sequencers for the most part, and some of them have more inputs than others. Some of them have longer sampling times than others. Some of them have time stretch. Some of them don't. Some of them have polyphony. Some of them have live resampling, and Q outputs, all sorts of stuff. There's so much for us to discuss and to compare, and which box is right for your particular workflow. I teach a ton of private lessons on my Patreon, which you can join and get those lessons yourself if you're interested in, and also from my website, ezbot.live, if you're interested in lessons. And a lot of the questions I get from people, they hit me up and they go, hey, I picked up so-and-so, I picked up a Tonverk, I picked up an Octatrack, I picked up a Digitakt. Is this the right one? Did I make the right decision? I see the other one looks like it's maybe easier, or this one has this live resampling feature. Do I need that? And so these are really common questions that people are having when there's so many choices for samplers. Technically, there's 4 Elektron samplers that you can buy today in the market today, just from your synth shop or Guitar Center or wherever you shop. And the 4th one would be the Analog Rhythm Mark II. I only have a Mark I. I didn't include it in the setup because the Analog Rhythm technically, to me, is more of a synthesizer than it is a sampler. So we're not going to talk about the rhythm. I would just say throw the rhythm into the category of Digitakt I, because that's where its sampling is Digitakt I style sampling on it. We have a Digitakt II, which is a much more superior sampler than the Analog Rhythm. That being said, let's take a look at the gear and just kind of and point out the different functionalities right on the faceplates of these 3 samplers. Cool. Octatrack Mark II at the top here, definitely the largest form factor of the 3 samplers. It is the most well-known, I'd say it's the most iconic sampler that Elektron has created. The Octatrack Mark II is seen in countless live setups, including bands like Radiohead, I think 9 Inch Nails. There's several large bands that use the Elektron Octatrack as a piece of their live show. There's tons of them. I'm sure people can add that to the chat. Digitakt II, not as common to see in a live electronic or not live electronic show, in a more like acoustic setup where they're playing guitars and there's a drummer and a keyboardist and stuff. You see a Digitakt II a little bit less. You see this more in the electronic music scene where people are doing live hardware, at least in my experience. I haven't been seeing them much, and I'm kind of got my ear to the wall in regards to this kind of information. So I haven't heard anything yet. The Tonverk, very new, very fresh, still coming out with new features, only recently got ironed out enough that I think people are feeling pretty comfortable on the unit. So I feel like the Tonverk is finally ready, and I think you're going to be seeing this similarly to the Octatrack in a lot of like band setups. So not just setups for live hardware electronic music or for music production in general in the studio. I think you're going to see this out at shows where people are playing guitars and playing drums and such. So that's a little bit of a comparison on like, where do these sit in that realm? This is an incredibly popular sampler for techno production, lo-fi, drum and bass, everything. This is like the ultimate sampler for hardware electronic music, and it has been for a very long time. It's got features unlike any of the other features here. It has the ability to live resample, which is something you cannot do on any of these boxes. While you can sample while the sequencer is playing on these 2 units, you cannot live resample while people are listening to music and then record a recording of what you have now and then switch over to that live sample in real time as a part of your performance. That's something the Octatrack offers, none of these other boxes offer. I'd say that's one of the big standouts. Besides that, it has the crossfader, which offers macros and scenes, which is actually something kind of similar to the Rhythm Mark II. That would have been a good comparison for it. Just the crossfader to the Rhythm, because the Rhythm has pads, and the pads actually have a performance macro set and a scene macro set similar to the Octatrack. And you can do a lot of stuff similar to the Octatrack with it in terms of live performance and effects. The Digitakt II has none of these things. It doesn't have, it has macros built into it, but you can't really access them. You can, technically, I'm gonna go over a bunch of little technical things as I'm like spinning around these boxes, talking about them, going back and forth between these boxes. So when it comes to like macro and live music and live effects and stuff like that, what can you do live with these boxes? The Digitakt II is the weakest of the three. While it is a fantastic drum machine to play live, but it is the weakest when it comes to like live effects and live transitions and stuff like that. Tonverk definitely has a one-up on that, and Octatrack completely stomps all three of them in this regard. The Digitakt does, however, offer a macro that you can use within your Digitakt as you're performing. If you go into your setup and if you turn off velocity to volume and set this to off, and then you can go into your velocity mod and you can set up a macro here, and then you can actually play with this macro with your velocity on a per step basis and or just turn up your velocity in general. And this will act as a macro similarly to what you would get from an Octatrack scene or an analog rhythm scene. This is the closest you're going to get without using a MIDI controller to add some sort of control over what's going on here on your Digitakt, control over effects, control over macros, stuff like that. Because there's other macros, but they require an external controller to access them. Tonverk doesn't even have the velocity to mod macro. It has other macros. But the Tonverk also has buses, where it can send whole tracks over to a bus, and you can do a high pass filter or low pass filter, or you can do reverbs and delays on your entire track. It has a master track built into it where you can put a compressor for compressing your entire output. Great for live performance, also good for live effects if that's something you want to do. While the Octatrack, again, completely obliterates them both when it comes to macro, live production, or live effects, transitions, all that kind of stuff. So if that's what you're after, this is a really great unit. Now, when we're talking about like, just getting that out of the way, just talking about like, what are these boxes for? They're all for the same thing. They're all for music production, but some of them really shine in specific situations. Like we were saying with the Octatrack, we're talking about this live thing. This shines in this very live production standpoint. Live production isn't, I'd say, an idea that gets talked about very much. People aren't doing very much live production. Right? Live production, I'd say, is what you do on a modular synth when you're doing a live techno setup. When you're just sending random gates, you're randomly generating sequences, and you're generating this live show. You can kind of do that pretty good on the Octatrack. You can at least mangle an existing track quite easily on the Octatrack and come up with something new on the fly. Not something you can easily do on the Digitakt or on the Tonverk, despite the Tonverk actually having these transform modifiers, which is hard to see because I have the camera so high up. But the transform modifiers allow you to randomize some of the triggers on your sequence. That's the closest you're going to get to like live mangling of your existing performance, except for without playing with the effects, right? On the Octatrack, I can literally live sample something, live resample something, and chop it up on the fly, and then just throw it down on triggers and randomly assign those triggers. That random assignment and live chopping, or just chopping in general, can be done on your Digitakt. So as far as production goes in the studio, the Digitakt totally nails it. But if you want to do this live thing, this is where it's at. To do that, like, it's also risky. It's a risky feeling to do it live. But it has, you know, kind of a superpower when it comes to that stuff. The Digitakt is a lot of fun live, but you spend a little bit more time playing with filter cutoff, volumes, and muting and unmuting. You do maybe some control-alt stuff or go into kit mode, and that's kind of the gist of your live performance with a Digitakt, which is fine. I think that's a good time. The Tonverk, similar to the Digitakt in that regard, except for you have more effects and less tracks. So technically it's a 16-track machine, but 8 of the tracks are used for these bus tracks and send effects tracks, which are kind of obscure and you're not really going to use them very much. They're mostly for making something interesting during the production part of your musical journey. So that's kind of where these three lie in terms of live shows, live performance. What you can do a ton with them, and this is gonna be a long stream. We're gonna talk about this probably for, you know, at least an hour and a half. And right now I'm kind of just checking off the boxes of things that are important to me when I'm thinking about what am I using these units for. Now, in terms of like the actual specifications, sample playback, let's talk about a little bit of the hardware, the ins and outs of these units. Of course, they all share the same amount of MIDI I/O, The Octatrack can't do USB MIDI, but these units can do USB MIDI, so that's a standout feature of these two versus the Octatrack. Octatrack has 2 stereo inputs, 3 stereo outputs technically, because it has a 1/4-inch headphone jack out that's stereo. So it has a Q out, which you can route audio out. You can hold Q, select tracks. Those tracks are now routed out the Q out, as well as routed out the main out. You can choose whether it goes out the mains and the Qs. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can use your Q bus as a live sample or a live resample target, where you're summing tracks down and you target the Q bus as your sampling source and sample that. You can do some really cool stuff with the I/O. You can also split your melody and drums, which is something I really like to do on the Octatrack, into the Octatrack, which is why I have the setup that I have. I do drums on left, melody on the right, and I split them into my Octatrack and use this as this centerpiece machine. The Octatrack uses a compact flash card. It has a ton of space. It streams its samples from the compact flash card. It has a very small amount of RAM, 86 megabytes of RAM. That's not very much. While in the audio data standpoint, 86 megabytes of RAM is not that bad. Songs, it's not a song length, but it's, you know, it's not an MP3. You know, it could fit a couple MP3s in there, right? But this doesn't play MP3s. It's playing .wav files, so it's not that much time that it can play, but it's enough time for you to do, you know, grab some 16-bar sequences or 8-bar sequences, a bunch of 4-bar sequences, or record small one-shots, chop them up, and save them as samples. And that's kind of its purpose. It has a live looper, but you don't want to live loop like, you know, 5 minutes at a time, because you'll use up all that RAM. Even though it has like dynamic options that let it go through the 8 different recording buffers, you're still going to run out of RAM rather quickly on here compared to your Digitakt or your Tonverk, which completely dwarf the amount of RAM that you have on the units. The compact flash card allows you to have pretty much infinite samples, I would say, in terms of how much you can put on this thing. I mean, you can I have a 64 gig compact flash card on here. I haven't even touched how that memory, like audio files are just not big enough for that to be that big of a deal. So nearly endless. You could DJ from the Octatrack if you wanted. You can play whole songs on the Octatrack, obviously, if you're DJing it. You can have really, really long recordings play on it. Up to 2 gigabyte files can play on an Octatrack. Kind of crazy. That's some pretty big files. Your Digitakt, on the other hand, is not quite the same when it comes to how much storage. It has a fixed amount of storage. It has a fixed amount of RAM as well, but it's a lot more, 400 megabytes of RAM versus the 86 megs that we have on the Octatrack. That's a pretty big deal. Sample slots. So like, even we have to talk about this for a second too. Like comparing, this is the biggest comparison I would say is between this Digitakt and the Octatrack. Which one do I get? Which one do I get? You know, because you think of this as a synthesizer almost when you hear about it. It does polyphony and all that. So it's like, you might not even be thinking the same question. But when you're comparing these two, you're definitely thinking, do I want to play drums and stuff on here? Do I want to use it as a one-shot player? Or I want to loop stems, or do I want to loop phrases and chop them up? You can do that on both of these units. And you could do it on them both very well. And they both sound really good. However, this plays back at 4416 or 4424 in terms of sample bitrate. And while that might not sound like that might sound great to you. Like, that's fantastic. I think that's what all my stuff goes through this. So personally, I think it sounds just fine. But when you do plug in a Digitakt into your computer and you listen to what you've written on your Digitakt versus what you've processed through your Octatrack, you will notice a little bit more sparkle on your track as it's going over USB or directly into your interface, as opposed to processing through an Octatrack and being brought down to 4424 or 4416 through its digital audio converters. The Digitakt is 4824 when it comes to its sample rate bitrate, or 4816. And 48 is a lot. That extra 4,000 sample rate is quite a bit of high end. And while it might be imperceptible to some, I can definitely tell when something is a little bit higher sample rate, a little bit more sparkle, which also means that it has to have more RAM and more storage than the samplers before it, because the files are larger at the sample and bitrate. The 400 megabytes of RAM allows you to have over 1,000 samples loaded into a project at a time, depending on the size of samples, but it has that many slots for you to load samples. You can have many live sets in one project on a Digitakt. That's a little harder to do on an Octatrack, whereas the Octatrack has 128 sample slots and 128 flex slots. They are independent from each other, but the flex slots use that tiny, tiny bit of RAM that you have. So you're never going to use 128 of those slots unless you're doing one-shots, which makes very little sense. To do that, you wouldn't usually do a bunch of one-shots in a flex track, but you'll do a bunch of one-shots on a static slot, which will stream from the compact flash card. Regardless, the point is that you only have 128 sample slots for the entire project on an Octatrack versus over 1,000 for a Digitakt. I mean, that alone might make a decision for you about what you're doing, right? Because you can put so much more into a single project on a Digitakt versus what you can do on an Octatrack. This also slices and has more RAM, but you could do sample chains, which is something that comes with a lot of sample packs for the Octatrack. You can do sample chains, and if you don't know what that is, it's a sample with quantized segments of samples within a chain of a single sample, and then you slice it up based on the length of those samples within that one sample. You get a chain of samples that you can use the slice markers to move between those samples. Something you can do on the Digitakt and the Octatrack cannot be done on the Tonverk. Despite the Tonverk being a sampler and so similar to these boxes in many ways, it cannot do that particular thing without you moving the start position and manually finding it, which is a total pain in the ass compared to what I'm describing right now. So sample chains is a big part of the Octatrack, not a big part of the Digitakt, because the Digitakt has enough memory where it does not need to do a sample chain despite its ability to do that. Cool. Now, when we're getting down to the bitrate sample rate of the Tonverk versus these three, if audio quality is all that matters to you, the Tonverk just stomps them all, right? I think it's 4832 in terms of its sample bitrate, 32-bit float as well, which basically means it's very difficult to clip. The floating bitrate helps you if you record something too loud. It like preserves those details even if it clips, and it can bring it down. This is what floating bit is really good for, is getting really dynamic recordings. This is a dynamic recorder. The Tonverk is a strange sampler in this regard. It's very unique. There isn't many out like it. It's a creative spot to dive into. It is a difficult machine to learn in regards to the simpler boxes like a Digitakt, which I think is kind of a simpler box from Elektron to learn. This one is definitely more akin to the Octatrack in regards to the thought process you have to go through. There's an exploration of, how do I use this? Why do I use this? What can I do with this? There's still a lot more to explore with this, as it is a very new box and people haven't really figured it out yet. What is its purpose? We don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that out. The Digitakt, we know exactly what the Digitakt does. The Digitakt is a fantastic groove box in general. Does great single cycle waveforms. Octatrack does terrible single cycle waveforms. It is not a good synthesizer. It's okay. In comparison to these, it's terrible compared to these ones as far as being a synth goes. Sample playback, it's just fine. But as being a synth playing single cycles and stuff like that, it sucks. This one sounds fantastic. It's a great mono synthesizer. It's got a huge pitch range for samples. So if you wanted to do just full-on groove box production on here, totally kicks ass. Tonverk, also fantastic for doing full-on music production. The only problem you run into on the Tonverk is that it just doesn't have enough tracks. But you have subtracks, but subtracks come with all these caveats, and we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, back over to our Digitakt. The Digitakt is definitely, of the three, I would say, the easiest to learn. It has the shortest hill to climb in terms of your learning curve goes. You can pick up a Digitakt and learn it in a day. Honestly, learn it like a pro in a day? No, of course not. That's crazy. Nobody learns anything like a pro in a day. But could you make a little banger on your Digitakt in your first day picking it up if you've never used Elektron before? I think so. I think you could watch a couple tutorial videos, kind of read the manual. Maybe you get a private lesson if you needed it, but you could just do what I said a moment ago and make some music on it pretty quickly. On the Tonverk, you're going to use an eighth, a 12th, a 16th of its features your first day using it. You're going to be confused, for sure. I mean, unless you've really been paying a lot of attention on what it does and you've been watching tutorials already. The Tonverk will confuse you at first. Using its full potential, it'll be very easy for you to just make sounds. And something to even note about these two in regards to like the difficulty. This is an interesting one. The Octatrack and the Tonverk, when you start a new project, make 0 sounds. They don't come loaded with samples for you to play with. They don't come with anything. They're blank canvases. In fact, what does that imply to you as a musician? When you open up a groove box and there's no sounds in it, there's an implication to that from the developer to you, with an expectation of your skill level with the box. I think this is kind of an important part for us to lament on for a second. There is an expectation from a developer that you know exactly what to do with this box when you open it up, both the Octatrack and the Tonverk. The expectation is that you know where to find your samples, you know which kinds of samples to load, you know where to load tracks or what kind of tracks to use for certain things, and you know how to trigger them and you know how to sequence already. The expectation is that you sat down and you learned this box, and that you can get stuff going on it. You can start with 0 and create music from it. That is not how the Digitakt works. The Digitakt, even if you load a brand new project, comes loaded with a preset set of 16 sounds in your track. It's got drums already loaded, it has synths already loaded, and technically if you wanted, you could just write music with that right off the bat. You could at least use the drums and play with someone else if you had no idea how to use the box, but you knew how to use an XOX style sequencer. The Digitakt would just work. It's simple. It's a simpler box. It's an easier box. It's a very fun and unique box in terms of other samplers out there because it also offers Overbridge, which is the only box of these 3 that is offered. Overbridge is incredibly cool. Overbridge is USB audio as a VST in your DAW, where you can control your Digitakt from within your DAW. It is the only one of these 3 that has it, although I do anticipate it coming to Tonverk, despite me having no idea if that's true. I did not get an opportunity to ask that of Elektron when I met them a few weeks ago, and if I had, they maybe wouldn't even let me tell you if they had told me. But I'll just be honest, I don't know, and they didn't tell me. So I'm not sure if it's coming here. I kind of expect it to. It's a newer box. It's got a similar form factor. It's Linux USB-C OS. I'm pretty sure they could pull it off. But now I want to talk about, now that we've talked about kind of like we still have more to talk about with the amount of tracks and sample slots. So we talked about this having 8 tracks of audio. It has 8 MIDI tracks. This has 16 tracks of audio or 16 tracks of MIDI. This has 8 tracks of audio or 8 tracks of MIDI. And I think you can use, can you turn the bus tracks into, yeah, you can turn the bus tracks into MIDI as well. So I guess 12 tracks of MIDI if you wanted it to be your MIDI sequencer. Over 1,000 samples, maximum of 256 if you use both static and flex tracks. Over here, a ton of samples, even more RAM, and compact flash card. So, like the Octatrack, your Tonverk can hold nearly unlimited samples, and it will stream them faster than the compact flash card on the Octatrack. I'm assuming. I don't know if that's true. I'm just assuming because the technology is several years older, over a decade older. I forget how much RAM the Tonverk has. What is it, 4 gigs or something of RAM? It has to be able to load very large multi-sample files, which can be enormous. I believe that it maxes out at 999 in terms of megabytes for multi-samples. So a multi-sample that is over a gig will not load on a Tonverk, but you don't need multi-samples of that degree on a Tonverk. We're trying to make music, not become an orchestra. You can go, get a Reactor or Native Instruments or something on your computer if you want to do that. But you can load great sounding multi-samples on here. Lots and lots of sample slots. If you were to use subtracks on here times 8, because each subtract has 8 tracks in it that can play samples back on each track with its own filter and envelope generator. Not effects, not its own effects, not its own LFOs, but its own filter and envelope generator on a per track for the subtracks, which is a machine available on the Tonverk. You technically could have 64 tracks on the Tonverk. That's not possible at all on these boxes. So technically, this actually kind of stomps them all in regards to like how many samples, how much sample can you have playing at the same time. Tonverk has you beat. Now, the thing that the Tonverk has that none of them have is that it is polyphonic. It can play 8 voices per track on the Tonverk, 16 voices of MIDI polyphony on the Tonverk. And can you believe that I have memorized all of this data? Because I have. This is coming off the top of my head. I'm not looking at a piece of paper. I can't believe that I'm even able to even think. I've saturated myself in Elektron so much that my brain is going to explode as I'm talking about this. I can't even believe I just feel like a freaking manual right now. But it's got tons and tons of voices. And that's incredible. There's no other instrument like this right now other than an MPC. The MPC Live 3 or Live 2 is also can play multi-sample as far as I understand, and the Deluge. I guess in the push. So maybe I'm lying when I say there's no others. There's no other like the way this thinks. This thinks in a way that's different than all those other boxes. Those boxes to me are DAWs in a box, except for the Deluge. Deluge is pretty unique. But I'd say the Ableton Push 3 and the MPC Live 3 are DAWs with all the controls compressed into a piece of hardware. And that's dope, honestly. Very cool to have all those features in a box. However, there's a scope creep that happens with stuff like that. A lot of people buy boxes like the Push 3 or buy boxes like the Live 3, and I think that they're both awesome. I love my Push 3 and I don't have a Live 3, but I do like Akai stuff. But I do say that people, I do say, and I do believe, that people buy boxes like those boxes and the scope creep. And what scope creep is when there's so many options that you can't focus, you don't get anything done, exists within those machines because they're so large with their potential. The thing about Elektron is they focus on each box. They might have some overlap, as these three do, but they keep you focused on a specific idea in each unit. Over here, we have live performance effects, live resampling. It's a performance sampler. It does live stuff. It's about being live. It's about interacting with, getting tactile, playing with it, touching stuff, using beat repeats, doing weird stuff, experimental stuff. Super cool, extremely unique. Digitakt, all about making your groove, this great drum beat, live resampling, chopping up breaks, then porting it all over with multi-track recording into your computer. It's a great drum machine, really fantastic drum machine. Tonverk, all about polyphony. The Tonverk is all about chords. It's all about granular clouds of just gorgeous goodness. It's about ambience. It's about getting experimental with huge sounds and effects. It's a playground for sound design with samples. And I assume a playground for sound design with all sorts of things as time comes. It is a sample player, and you can do all sorts of sample stuff with it. You can do single cycle waveforms in here, and it is just a polysynth, straight up polysynth. You can load in square waves or sawtooths or whatever you want them to be, and you can go in and use the effects like the filter folder, and you can use a folder, a wave folder, and get new wave shapes from your raw primary waveforms on here with multiple tracks. Everything in stereo. Fantastic. That's what this is for. This is for playing polyphonic sounds and for making whatever you want to make with that ability, with that superpower. Multi-sample your Prophet 5 and bring it over to your Elektron show and go perform with the Prophet 5 that's in the box. Take your favorite patches from Serum 2 on your computer, which is freaking amazing, by the way. It sounds so damn good. Sample them from your computer to your Tonverk, bring that with you and go play a show. Run it through the Tonverk effects. Sequence with your favorite sequencer, the Elektron sequencer. It's the best sequencer you can get. This is, in my opinion, the cream of the crop in terms of sequencers go. It's the most intuitive sequencer. Go into a step editor, hold down a step, turn a knob. Does it get any easier than that? I can't imagine that it does. It just, because it doesn't. It doesn't get easier than that. That is as easy as it gets. Press something down, turn a knob, hear the sound change, locked into your sequence. Why would you, I can't even imagine looking somewhere else. There are other sequencers that offer a similar workflow, but you have to program them to communicate with these machines because they are not a part of another unit. And I think that's a really important distinction. You can pick up another sequencer that's really cool, a MIDI sequencer, but it's got to be programmed to play these machines. This already has the best sequencer you can buy, in my opinion, built into the boxes. All right, so just as I lament on all these different comparisons for all of these units, let's continue on. The Tonverk's inputs and outputs versus the Digitakt and the Octatracks. The Tonverk has 2 stereo outputs. It has a headphone output. It has an A and B output. It has a CD output, or I'm sorry, 3 stereo outputs and 1 stereo input is what I mixed that up. It's got 3 stereo outputs. 2 of them you can really be very surgical with on what's going out those tracks. Your A and B output, you can say, I want stuff to go just out A and B. You can say, I want stuff to just go out C and D. You can also route things to your headphone, but that will also be combined and summed with your main outs. This is something I just learned recently from my buddy Charlie, because I actually didn't know that until yesterday. So you have lots of different options in terms of how you want to route audio. Do you want to send your kick out to a compressor for sidechain compression on external gear? You can do that here. You can do that here because you could send your kick out through your Q output into a compressor and sidechain an external compressor if you wanted. You can do that with that. You cannot do that here. That's a limitation. You're going to find a limitation and some sort of fix for it on all of these boxes. All of them are going to have something where they go, oh, I can do that, but I can't do that. I can do that, but I can't do that. But I can mostly do all the same stuff, but I can't do that one very specific thing that you might be after. And that's why, like, understanding what each box is so useful. Sidechain. Sidechain is something that is so important to a hardware, to a music producer in general, to an electronic music producer especially. Sidechain on the Octatrack is a gimmick. It's an LFO, parameter locked on the sequence on steps that you want. It's an exponential wave, or it's the filter envelope. You can also use the filter envelope and use that to sidechain duck using the filter. I actually quite like it. Or you can use the LFO to your amplifier. That's your sidechain. That is not sidechain. And it doesn't sound that great all the time. Sometimes it has a little click or something from the amplifier opening too quickly or opening because of MIDI jitter or something like that. It doesn't sound fantastic. The Digitakt has true sidechain, and you can make a sidechain bus. In fact, the workflow that I do on the Digitakt with my sidechain is I set my sidechain up on track 16. I put the sequence that I want to sidechain down on 16. I omit track 16 from my main output, and then I have my compressor target track 16 and do whatever I want, and I send all of my tracks that I want into my compressor when I want to compress them. I do the same thing on my Digatone. The Digitakt can do this. Incredibly powerful. Incredibly... I want to grab you and tell you how important that is to me in my music production, that I can do that, and how fun that is, and how it's performative. And it's not something I can do on my other boxes other than my Digatone. It just can't happen. The Digitakt can do that. It is the best drum machine that I own. It is my favorite drum machine, other than my Rhythm, but the Rhythm is a little old now. But it is my favorite drum machine that I own. It's the one I use the most and probably will be for a long time. Really cool, very easy, just has all the quality of life features that you need as a producer. Now, sidechain on the Tonverk, another important concept, especially because it's doing all of this melodic stuff, it's doing chords, it's doing drones, it's doing crazy noises, doing noise sweeps, and you want to have that pump and that noise sweep and all that. We're doing techno production, all that cool stuff. This can do it too. This has sidechain compression, but it doesn't have the same routing concept. It has the concept where you choose what you want to go into what bus. You can also do this from other tracks. And you route that into a bus, and you set up a compressor on that bus, and you have a targeted track like your kick, and it will do sidechain compression that way. Alternatively, and my actual preferred method on the Tonverk explicitly, is to not use a sidechain, is to not use a compressor at all, because the Tonverk, unlike any of these boxes, has an envelope. It has a mod envelope. And what's better than an envelope for doing a sidechain ducking? Honestly, I can shape it exactly without having to worry about threshold or routing or any of that stuff. I just do the envelope. It's fantastic. It's actually really, really great and sounds quite nice. And you can do that on your buses. Or you can go to your amplifier and do it right here on your bus tracks. So you can route over all the sounds that you want into your amplifier. Go to your bus, route it to your bus. I use bus 12 as my sidechain ducking bus on the Tonverk, and I'll put 4 on the floor, something like that. And I'll go to my amplifier, and I'll just have the envelope invert by going negative, and then I'll shape my sidechain. This chooses whether it's stereo or not. Just works. And it works. And it works well. I can carve out any sort of sidechain I want to do and set the depth with my envelope depth. Just works. Octatrack sucks at sidechain ducking. Compared to these two, it doesn't even exist. It's so far behind. However, it kicks all two of these samplers' asses at live performance. It's the best. It even has a mute mode that's like fun because it covers both the MIDI side and the audio side in its mute mode, and it has solo. Check this out. You can't even solo on these other boxes, but you can solo on an Octatrack. Look at that. You hold Q in your mute mode and you can solo tracks. You can't solo over here? Why not? You can't. Octatrack can. So it's like, what's going on with these boxes? They all have these different superpowers. They all totally work. Now, I want to cover something that I think is really important. I know I'm kind of all over the place with this discussion because it's kind of like as things pop up, I'm just like, I get up really emotional about this because I love these things so much, and I'm constantly having to answer these questions. But it's like, okay, I want to get a drum. Let's just like, well, maybe I'll even chapter mark this, cut off. I want to get a drum machine. Why would I choose one drum machine over another? Let's start with the Octatrack. The Octatrack, in my opinion, compared to both of these, Digitakt and Tonverk, sucks as a drum machine. Totally sucks as a drum machine. Its mute mode is an audio mute where it cuts everything out, can only load 128 samples in its static slots. By default, it plays everything infinitely. You go into your amplifier stage. Your amplifier or your length for your sampler is just turned off by default. It expects you to play phrases. In fact, when I'm saying expects you to play phrases, you should note this is a phrase sampler. It expects you to load loops and chop loops. While it's great at doing that, when I think of a drum machine, I think of one-shots. And that's what I mean by drum machine. I mean like one-shots. I'm going to program a 4 on the floor, kick beat, hi-hat pattern. If I use up, if I'm playing techno, let's use techno as our example because techno has a lot of drums that hit at the same time. This doesn't do polyphony. This one does, but it doesn't do polyphony. So you like if I have a kick and a snare and a hat and they all hit on the 5 of my sequence, or they all hit on the 8 of my sequence, whatever. I have to use 3 tracks to do that, unless I resample it and save it onto a track. Because I only have 8 tracks, so 3 of my tracks are gone just for that one moment in a drum sequence. That sucks. That's where a phrase comes into play, where you have something already recorded, or you resample it of pattern and resample it and turn it into a phrase, which is a fun process, and honestly, I enjoy that. But in terms of being a drum machine, just a straight up one-shot player, this thing totally sucks compared to this. This schools the Octatrack as a drum machine, as a one-shot player, as something you load up with your favorite 909s, 808s, 707s, Lin drums, real drums, whatever, your stuff you've sampled from your modular. Put it in your Digitakt as a one-shot and just use these 16 tracks, over 1,000 slots for samples. How many drum kits can you load in here? It has kits for drums, no kits. 4 parts, which are kits. So 4 kits at max. Tons of kits, 16 kits, I think. Maybe more kits, I actually don't know how many kits. How many kits does it have? Infinite kits. What am I even talking about? Maybe it's not infinite, maybe it's 30 kits. Doesn't matter, it's a lot. It's a lot more. We know that. Has actual kits, more samples. It can chop. It's a phrase sampler too. Didn't used to be, but it is now. So it also does the same thing as the Octatrack. So if you need a drum machine, this is the one to get. Now you could get this as your drum machine, as it has a one-shot player, just like your Digitakt, but it doesn't have the other machines the Digitakt has. The Digitakt has all sorts of machines to kind of keep it up to par with the Octatrack, so that you can do the things the Octatrack does in terms of like being able to take a phrase and stretch it out to your tempo if it's a quantized sample. You can do that on the Octatrack. Like it's got time stretch. We have time stretch on the Digitakt, but it's a machine. It's like a concept. It's like a tool that you use and then you resample and you move on. Or you use it as a track and try and do weird stuff with a sample with your time stretch machine. It's different. It's implemented differently. It's not implemented in a way that is quite easy to understand compared to time stretch on the Octatrack. So as far as time stretch goes, the Octatrack completely kicks all 3 of their asses. But this is the ultimate one-shot player. This is the ultimate in that regard. The Tonverk is a fantastic one-shot player too, and it has polyphony. You can do all sorts of tricks. You can actually kind of layer sounds on a single track, even if you weren't using subtracks, because of the polyphony. So I could have a kick, a snare, and a hat all play right over each other if the length of the sample permitted. It can do that because of its massive polyphony that it has. But it also has subtracks, and subtracks are unique and strange at times. You can create a new one if you want, but you can load up a subtrack. And what it is it's going to be 8 sounds preloaded if you want, and put it on a track. And this are 8 different tracks. Where's this undo redo doesn't do much yet, sadly. But you have subtracks. So subtracks give you 8 samples you can play back. They're really easy to load onto. You just hold function, press 1, grab a sample. It's that easy. So you could technically have 64 samples, as I had mentioned earlier during the stream. So could this be your drum machine? Totally. Is it going to be better than a Digitakt? No. It doesn't have slicing. It doesn't have time stretch. Will it have time stretch in the future? I don't know. Probably. It's got this new CPU. I hope so. But does it need it? No, not really. It doesn't even need it. Because you're not really doing that here. You're doing that here, or you're doing that here. Because these are playing phrases and chopping phrases. This is playing one-shots and chopping phrases. This is playing polyphony. But it's a sampler, and it's a sampler, and it's a sampler. And they all have the Elektron sequencer. They all have RAM. They all have sample slots. And they can all sample. So you can technically do the same thing on all 3 of these machines, but where this shines is the polyphony. So for as far as one-shots go, this is not the winner, but it is the winner over the Octatrack, in my opinion, as far as one-shots go. Now, as far as phrases go, the Digitakt and the Octatrack are fighting head-to-head. If you're loading samples, longer samples, preferably quantized samples, into the Octatrack or the Digitakt, the two of them are going to compete for which one should do what. Should which one be my drum machine in this regard? Because if it's just going to be phrases, there's no reason not to use an Octatrack. It can do it too. And the time stretch on it is much more intuitive. It's turned on by default. Over here for time stretch for a phrase, if you want to change the tempo on a phrase, you have to load it into a time stretch machine. Set your recorder to target the track that has the time stretch on it. So if it was on track 10, you target track 10, set it to the length of your sample, make sure your trig length for that time stretch sample is set to the same length that you intend to record for, then you got to record it, then you got to save it, then you got to reload it on the machine. And that's how you deal with time stretching a sample on a Digitakt in very short and maybe not easy to follow terms. There's lots of tutorials on this stuff, which I've done myself. But that's how you do it on the Digitakt if you want to time stretch something. It's a whole process. You got to learn. And it's like something that's not intuitive. You don't even think about it. You're like, if you're new to the Digitakt and you want to time stretch a sample, you might be lost. You might be lost for a while. It's not in the manual. It's not going to say in the manual, load the time stretch machine, set the trigger length, record for this length of time, replace the track with that sample. That's not going to be in an Elektron manual. They do throw some examples of stuff in their manuals, but not examples like that. You don't have to even think about that stuff on an Octatrack. You just load a phrase into your Octatrack and it just works. Just works every single, well, not every single time. Samples over 4 bars, samples going into 8 bars, 16 bars, Octatrack struggles. Octatrack starts to think the tempos are wrong, splits them in half, doubles the speed at which they play. Does some sorts of mistakes that it starts having with longer samples and phrases. Whereas the Digitakt doesn't have that same problem. It doesn't have those issues with that because it doesn't guess like the Octatrack does. The Octatrack is guessing your BPM, and it will give you a value that it thinks your BPM is. And in fact, if you put the BPM in your samples, in the name of your samples, the Octatrack will try and use that to judge whether or not the sample is at a certain BPM. Pretty cool, and something I would expect from Elektron. So, smarter time stretch that sounds even, I think, a little better than the Digitakt time stretch, but is on an older machine with a little bit of older sample quality with less tracks. So again, which one do you get? You know what I mean? It's still like you're always going to be confronted with this. Which one do you get? What is your purpose for your music production? Buying all these boxes at the same time, sure, that'll be cool. But what is your purpose with these machines. To me, if you buy an Octatrack, your purpose should be to play with this crossfader. Whether that's to manipulate a sample or to manipulate other instruments running through your Octatrack, that's what this should be for. You should be buying this because it can do this and because it can live resample. If those are not interesting to you, this is not for you. It's hard to learn, it's limited, and it's big. It's the biggest. And it's the most expensive by a little bit. This is pretty close. And now, if you just want a dope drum machine that can do most of the stuff the Octatrack can do, has overbridge, smaller, a little bit cheaper, used to be a lot cheaper, now it's quite expensive, then you want a Digitakt. This is your drum machine. This is your homie for drums. And for just groove box in general. Like, you can just write your whole songs on here. You don't even need the other boxes. Just write them on there. And if you want to do experimental polyphonic stuff, you get the Tonverk. If you want to take your instruments in your studio and sample them down and bring them with you to a performance, or have them in the Tonverk so that you can use its sequencer and its effects, the Tonverk. That's what this is for. It's not for drums. It can play drums, but that's not its purpose. And that's not what it leans into. That's not its superpower at all. Superpower, live resampling, macro control. Superpower, sequencing tons of tracks with lots of different samples that it can do. Ease of use, great sound. That's its superpower. Overbridge. Superpower, polyphony, experimental effects, interesting routing, multiple outputs. That's the superpower. So it's like, those are the things you need to decide on when you're going to pick up these units, in my opinion. Hopefully this is helpful for you. I know there's a whole lot of chatter with this particular topic, and I could rant for hours and hours and hours. I mean, you could give me a very specific question, and I'll go ham on that. There's no doubt. So let me see. I'm going to roll up in the chat and see what people are saying for a second, and I'm going to find a topic someone brings up, and I'm going to lament on it further. The light is bright in the studio right now because I accidentally left the slider thing open. It's a little bright. What's up, everybody? It is so good to see everyone. I don't know why the stream is showing up like that. It's a bummer. So maybe we'll just go to this screen. Right now I'm reading your chat, and I see a lot of faces in here that are very familiar. Glad to have you back and hanging out with me on a Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday, live stream, live hardware, electronic music. I happen to be extremely invested into Elektron, and over the years I've made a lot of videos, and I do a live stream every week. It usually involves Elektron, some sort of tutorial, if not just production or discussion. And I talk about this stuff a lot. I think I know what I'm talking about in regard to the electronics themselves, the way the boxes are used, and how to use them. I don't pretend to be the best music producer in the world or anything like that, but I do think I know these boxes quite well, and I think you should be able to take my word on most things. I'm happy to be corrected when I'm wrong. Remain teachable is something that I think is really important, and I try to be that person, to remain a teachable person in this regard. So if you have some arguments that you want to pose with me today, do it. I'm down. I'm down to battle. The Tonverk is matrix green. Very important feature. Thanks. That's true. Let's see. Octatrack for the win, says Fanfiction Studio. Octatrack is best for that. Here's a question I'm getting asked right now. Here's a topic for us. I think. By Chat0909SB. What's up, Chat0? Hey, EZBOT. How would you deal with long samples and loops on the Digitakt when your set changes BPM? The Octatrack does this so good with time stretch, but I mean, I want Digitakt. It's a tough question. Really, really good question. And a tough question. What are you gonna do when you don't have live time stretch on the Digitakt? The answer is that you're gonna have to bake in your change into your performance. That's the answer. You have to bake that into your sample playback. Since it can't do time stretch naturally. I mean, you can technically, So, I mean, technically, you can put your whatever sound in the time stretch machine, and when you change the tempo, it's going to time stretch because you have a time stretch machine, right? The stretch machine works. The problem is that, you know, you don't want to have all your samples in there. You want to be able to time stretch your whole performance. That's not what the Octatrack does anyway. The Octatrack doesn't, you don't want to time stretch your kick drum. It sounds terrible. You know, time stretch your snare, maybe, but your kick drum, definitely not. It doesn't sound good. What you do on the Octatrack a lot of times with time stretch and performance to go to another track is you make a you record a live performance of your track, preferably at the BPM you intend to transition to. Then you transition over to that recording. Then you move patterns and you transition back on the Octatrack. That's something you can do on the Octatrack. Octatrack is extremely special, and that's why the Octatrack is always in my setup. Now it's like, which one is right for you? I know that's the question posed in the title or in the thumbnail. That's what I said. Which one is right for you? And that's really because I wanted to draw. I want to draw all these. I want to draw you in to ask these questions and see this information. But the answer is all three of them, in my opinion. They're all right for you. They're all good at what they do, and they all need each other to continue to do good stuff. The Octatrack does what chat 0909 SB is saying. It can transition. So if I have, here's your answer, chat 909. If I have a Digitakt and an Octatrack, I can use the Octatrack's time stretch to transition my Digitakt. That's your answer, is both. But if you just wanted a Digitakt and you want to deal with this scenario, you can't. You just can't do what you're asking. Well, I guess what you could do, this would be kind of a pain in the ass to do, but what you could do technically is you could resample your entire track and pattern, like say your song was 4 patterns long. Pattern 5, you could have a resample of what pattern 4 sounded like at the end of your pattern 4. You know, it all has to do is be an approximation of what you assume your last unmute and effects change will be on pattern 4. And you could resample that whole thing and have that play on pattern 5. And then you put it in a time stretch machine on pattern 5, and you use pattern 5 as a transition track. So you move from 4 to 5, and then you can change your tempo on 5 and it will time stretch in real time. There's a good answer, I think. It's actually not too big of an ask to create transition tracks. So hopefully that answers your question. Hit me with another one. I'm gonna knock them all out of the park today. I've had enough coffee. The effects on the Tonverk are great with the microphone. I agree. The wizard arrived early. Good old wizard. Hey, Matt and chat. The answer is always buy them all. I agree. Let's see. We're looking for more questions. I want the Octatrack if they make a new edition. They'll make a new one. They'd be fools to not make a new one. I mean, why would you have the most popular sampler in the world and not make another one? That would be insane. But maybe they're insane. I don't think so, though. I think they'll make one. Here's fingers crossed for 2027, 2028. I'm using the Tonverk exclusively for sound design. I use the Digitakt II to store all of my finished sounds for the track arrangements and performance. The Syntakt is dust collecting duties. That's a bummer for the Syntakt. I love the Syntakt. You know, I actually spoke with Elektron recently. I know I probably said this a few times, but I spoke with Elektron in person, some of the developers from Sweden. We had some really cool conversations. And I got to ask a lot of interesting questions, some of which I cannot share. Many of which I cannot share, but one of which I will. And we were talking about the rhythm, model cycles, and the Syntakt. And, you know, the rhythm and the model cycles, this is a little side quest from our topic today. The rhythm and the model cycles are when you squish them together, not are, but when you squish a rhythm and a model cycles together, you get the Syntakt, right? I think we've established that. But the Syntakt, the engines on the Syntakt are actually an improved version of your analog rhythms, analog engines. So they're technically better because of the hardware is better and faster. So the response and how they sound is actually improved over the analog rhythm. Fact. These are the facts. Pretty cool. Pretty cool to know that your syntax is actually just, just a little bit better than your rhythm, even with the same engines that the rhythm has. Let's see, we have any more questions? You're impressed with my ability to get through the tongue twisters with such finesse? I mean, I've stumbled a few times on speaking. Tonverk is more for music production than performance. I don't know if I agree with that. Pluto Loco. Because I think they're all for performance. I think that Elektron only designs instruments for performance. I don't think any of Elektron's instruments are designed not for performance, including model samples and model cycles. Even more so there, too. So I think you're right that they're designed for production, but I think that they're very much designed for performance. I think the effects on the Tonverk, what's so fantastic about the Elektron boxes in general, in my opinion, is that when I'm explaining these boxes to people, minus the Octatrack is a little bit different in this regard, but when I'm explaining this stuff, you have 2 windows essentially on each window, including the Octatrack. It's just 6 instead of 8. You have your bottom window, you have your top window, you have your bottom window, top window, bottom and top. And you have 4 encoders that apply to the bottom of the window and 4 that apply to the top window. On all the boxes, you have these encoders that are assigned to whatever you see at the top of the window, 1-to-1 at all times. And because of that, any of these boxes is a performance box. When it comes to performance, live performance, what you need is to know what you're doing. You need to know that when I turn this knob, it does A. Turn the A knob and it does this thing. Turn the B knob and it does this thing. I need to know what those things do, and I need it to tell me that information so I'm not lost during a performance. All of these boxes have that done very well. Extremely intuitive. Not everything works like that. Some stuff is really tough. Not every box has that ability. One of my favorite things of all favorite music production devices of all time is the M8 tracker. But when it comes to live performance on the M8 tracker, it's mostly a song player. While you can plug in MIDI controllers to try and control stuff, it doesn't have this, the knob per value in your screens. And so when a box doesn't have this, I don't really feel like it's a very live performance box. And so that's my argument for why these are all live performance boxes. Octatrack or SP404 for effects and performing? Well, Octatrack, easy. I want the analog 4. Get out of here. The black doesn't match and it's killing you. GG. You're right. There's a lack of contrast on these units versus how contrasted the black is here, and that's because there's a different finish. The finish on the Tonverk is darker for sure, and I'm pretty sure that everything will be like this eventually. And maybe these boxes will even get the same finish. I don't know. I do like the finish on these, but they're fingerprint and dirt hoarders, and the Tonverk just stays clean. Doesn't get dirty because of the finish. So I think that's technically a better finish on the Tonverk. Not that that's a weird comparison for us to make, considering that these two have the same, like that in this sampler comparison, this one's gonna stay cleaner than these. These are gonna get dirty. This one is not. Now, like when it comes to like some of the controls, this is a different unit than these units. It has ideas these don't have. This has almost every idea that this has, other than the crossfader and the live resampling. These two are very, very close to each other. This is really kind of like cannibalized the Octatrack a lot. This one, on the other hand, has not cannibalized these units very much. It's got some of its own ideas. I don't even know. It might even have been developed before the Digitakt II's development. I'm not sure. It might have started development before this thing was even starting to get made. Because I know it's 7 years old in terms of its development. It's older. Been working on it for a long time. But that's an interesting comparison to make. A comparison I do want to discuss. I know we're asking questions in the chat. I'm answering questions. There hasn't been that many questions yet. It's mostly like comments. So questions are what I'm after. But I want to show you something. I want to talk about the sampling process and the differences between all 3 of these boxes and how they sample and what is the limitations on their sampling. Now, they're all so different. I should have started with this, honestly. Sampling on the Octatrack is confusing. Sampling on the Octatrack is the hardest thing people do on the Octatrack. They buy an Octatrack and they go, how do I sample? So confused with this machine, and it is confusing. It's a sample on the Octatrack. You have to, load a track up. Let's just go to a blank blank bank. It's got blank parts in it, so everything's blank here. You want to, go into your sampler recording setup, and you have two of these setups where you can set up how the recorders react. And you have things like when you're in here, you have a second sequencer, and the sequencer is a sampling sequencer. These don't have sampling sequencers. Just this one does. So you can set the sequencer up to sample for you at different times to do weird creative stuff with that. I've done a ton with this as a sampler, as a sequencer sampler, where I'm using offset. I'm offsetting the playhead of the recorder, not the playhead, but the trigger of the sampler, so that it's constantly resampling. And then I have another track that's playing back. I don't offset this one. I offset the playback one after the recorder. So it's constantly playing back what it records, and then I slow it down, repitch it, and get these crazy sounds from my live audio. That's something you can't do on these ones. It's very unique to the Octatrack. Really powerful, really cool. Gritty, lo-fi, crazy. Nothing else does it. I don't know of anything else that can do it. But to have its own sampler sequencer, I mean, that's crazy. Here it is, your track trig edit, and at the bottom we have a recorder trig sequencer. Very unique to the Octatrack. We can also turn these recorder trigs into one-shot triggers so they can get activated by pressing a button, and then they only function one time. So you can actively record your live performance or other instruments anytime you want with this pre-setup recording setup, and it goes into a track and it records into the track in real time, and you can chop it in real time. So you go into your setup here and go crazy setting up how you want your recorder to be. You also typically need to change your track to the flex track, and then you need to assign your flex track to a recording buffer. None of this stuff is done for you or thought of for you. You have to learn how to do it. You got to crack open the manual, you got to watch tutorials, and you got to practice, because sampling on here isn't easy. It's hard in terms of other samplers. We're not talking about like hard as in hard like lifting a boulder. It's very easy compared to something like that. It's not truly difficult. It's just hard compared to how easy it is on other units, other samplers. Because it's hard and harder because it offers you more ideas. You can get more creative with how it samples. It samples in a way that no other units sample. It live resamples. It chops, lets you play back sampling without committing it to a compact flash card. Every one of these ones, when you sample something, to use it, you have to save that sample to your compact flash card, and then the machine has to load that back into the project. You don't have to do that on the Octatrack. Octatrack can just play with live sound, record it, and you do whatever you want with it. Super cool. Very unique. You can also just sample on here. You've got 3 different sampling sources that you have access to at all times. If I go to track 1 and I want to sample onto track 1, I can just hit 1. Little recorder's going. I can jump over and take a look at that recording. It's recording nothing at the moment, but it's recording just by hitting a button. There it is, going again. Getting the ground floor. How do what do you even do with this? And then you got to save it. Function rec 3, save this recording. That's how you do it. Or you go into your audio editor, go into your attributes section. All these attributes, big audio editor in the Octatrack. It's more like a DAW in terms of how it treats audio. Very deep sampling, very deep audio editor. You can even like invert the phase of your samples or add fades to samples. You can copy and paste parts of one sample onto another. That's in here too. Press yes and go in here, and you can change your copy mode. Change paste mode. There's a mix mode for your paste. So you could paste a kick onto a snare or a hat onto a kick. Whatever. You can do that on the Octatrack. You cannot do that over here. Very unique to the Octatrack. Very deep audio editor. Sampling, definitely the strongest on the Octatrack. It's the strongest sampler of the 3 when it comes to the actual sampling process. Also the most difficult and confusing. Digitakt sampling. Press this button. Plug into left and right input or USB. Target. Do a threshold or use the sequencer to trigger the recording. Arm it. Set the length. monitoring on and off. That's it. Easy, easy, easy. When you sample on here, it's just easy. Piece of cake. You can save a bunch of chops of your sample from that menu. You can zoom in and do everything you need to do. Piece of cake. Easiest sampler on the planet. I can't imagine an easier sampler than the Digitakt when it comes to sampling. Again, the Digitakt comes preloaded with sounds. You play sounds on it. I mean, they all come with samples, but this one, when you load a project, you have, you know, by default, you have sounds that you can hear. Right off the bat on a Digitakt. Very easy to sample, plug stuff in, it just goes. It's just so easy. Now over on the Tonverk, sampling is similar to the Digitakt. Very easy. You just hit yes, and this sampler look pretty similar. They're almost the same, except for this has this confusing record length, which goes in bars. You can get these really long bars. There's 32 bars. So definitely a little bit of a different approach. I'm not sure why they did that. But otherwise, it's the same. You can set it to be threshold or play start. This has no threshold recording. This has threshold recording. Threshold recording, if you're unfamiliar with threshold recording, is similar to how a compressor or an envelope follower works, if you're familiar with either of those two ideas. So when a volume or a dynamic, let's just say volume, when a volume reaches a certain level, it triggers, you set a threshold to a volume level, and it will trigger the sampler. The sampler will start recording based on that threshold. And that's how threshold recording works. Your Octatrack does not have that. Both these units have threshold recording. Very easy to sample with threshold recording. You can like arm your sampler, grab your guitar, and go ring, and it will sample. On an Octatrack, that is not the case. On the Octatrack, you want to do that, you got to set up the sequencer to do it, and you got to hit yes, and you got to wait for it, 1, 2, 3, ring, and do it, or you got to hold a button and strum it with one hand or something. It just doesn't work. So it doesn't have that same experience. Sampling on here, you can do hands-free sampling. No hands-free sampling, you can queue stuff up and do hands-free, but you can't just have the machine not running, no clock running, and just sample like you can on both of these units. Now, what's also unique is that this has another sampler that no other box has. It has an auto sampler. An auto sampler is very strange. The auto sampler is probably the most difficult thing on the Tonverk in general. The auto sampler can target USB or internal, I believe. It also needs to use a MIDI channel. And you can target your source here. So input or USB, I guess not internal, sadly. You should be able to do internal. I guess you can just route it back into itself because it has the multiple outputs. But it automatically will measure the timing for your MIDI jitter. So when it sends a note to an external instrument, it'll measure how long it took, and it will try and compensate when it's doing its recordings. This is why, and then it will go to your next stage, and you can set up what notes you want it to sample, and it will automatically sample them and place them into a multi-sample file. If you've ever done multi-sampling on a computer, it's very annoying. It's a not fun process. It's something you do in like audio school. I went to music school, and it's not, I don't enjoy multi-sampling. It's not like a blast, but you can build an instrument and it's just done. This one will automatically sample an instrument over MIDI. It'll use MIDI to trigger it, and then it will count that length, and it will put it into the correct spot for your samples. And you can create these very large and cool samples with velocity layers so that at certain velocities it sounds unique. And that's what a multi-sample does. It's like the best way to copy another instrument is through a multi-sample, and that's its superpower, is to copy, make clones of instruments, very realistic clones of instruments, and then process them through crazy Elektron effects. And that's what this does. And it can do pretty long recordings or very large files. But it's confusing at first. I think it's definitely the harder of the samplers to use, excluding the Octatrack being the most difficult sampler to use of them all in terms of the difficulty sampling, if you're not like very familiar with that. Right off the bat, this one's a little bit more confusing. One of the problems with the auto sampler on the Tonverk, which is not like a problem if we're comparing the three, because none of them can do what the Tonverk can do in terms of how it samples, but one of the issues with the auto sampler on the Tonverk that people will complain about until Elektron adds this, and that is the ability to do manual multi-sampling. The Tonverk cannot do manual multi-sampling. So if you want to record your guitar like an acoustic multisample, you cannot do that with a Tonverk. You can't just hit the multisample and have it do a threshold. It should have threshold multisampling. So it goes play C and you play C. It like should prompt you. Play C5 and play C5. Play D6, whatever. That's not built into the unit yet. I don't know when that's coming, if it's coming. I hope it does. I think it's a necessity for the unit because that's what people are really wanting with the Tonverk. But that's a limitation when it comes to its multisampling. So all of their sampling is very different. These two being a lot more modern and built for people who maybe don't have the patience for setting up all this sampling stuff that you have to do on the Octatrack. It's much more difficult. They both sample for, this one samples for the longest period of time. This has a bigger limitation on how long it samples. I think it's like 66 seconds or something. The old Digitakt was 33 seconds. This can sample for much. This will sample until the memory runs out. 86 megabytes will just sample. This can still play back large samples, but it can't sample for a very long time. And I think this can sample for a lot longer. I'm actually unsure how long the Tonverk can sample for because I haven't stress tested that myself. But I guess we could try and find out. Oh wait, we got to set it up. Let's see. If I set the length. The length is, length max, 6 minutes, 6 seconds. Oh yeah, very long time. 66 seconds. 6 minutes and 6 seconds. Okay, so this wins in sample length, I think. Pretty cool. So now we know that. So, I mean, if this had chopping and time stretch, it would be a hard argument to not just get 2 of these and not have a Digitakt, which makes you think that that will never happen. Because that would be a foolish thing for a company to do, right? If we're just talking, if you owned the Elektron, would you do that to your own, cannibalize your own instruments like that? Pretty cool. Is that what that means? 6 minutes, 6 seconds? Am I interpreting that incorrectly? I'm confusing myself with its weird value that it has here. All right, we're going to go back to answering questions because I think I talked about the sampling workflow deeply, and now I think you know. The OPXY does do multi-sampling. He doesn't know anyone's name in his life because of this. He's done this for us. Sponsor him, LaCroix. I know nothing. Sponsor me. Where is my LaCroix? My God. I am thirsty suddenly. The more you learn about Tonverk, the more it seems very cool. It is very cool. L. Danny says, the Digitakt is the gold standard. Octatrack is rare earth. Everybody wants it, but not everybody masters it. Tonverk is crypto. Let's see where we go. This is actually really good. L. Danny's analogy is so spot on because it's so true. That is kind of how it is. Where will the Tonverk go? Digitakt is definitely, you know, it's gold, the gold standard, so it is gold. Like, we know what it's like, we know its value, we know it's good. And the Octatrack is definitely hard to learn. Well, everybody wants to learn it, but is it worth it? It's, to me, the Octatrack is the Dark Souls of electronic music. And Dark Souls is, if you're not familiar with it, is a really difficult video game and very unforgiving. And it kind of set this standard for what an unforgiving experience feels like, but rewards you for a lot of effort. And that's what the Octatrack does. It rewards this huge effort that you put into it. And that's why I make these performance templates on it. You have to spend years learning it to be able to do the kind of stuff that I like to do on the unit. I do the same sidechain audio routing on track 16, also exclude track 15 from the main outs so I can get wet only recording from the FX. Oh, that's a good idea. Nice, good job, good thinking. DT2 is goated. These other samplers are trash and can be ignored. Get out of here. DT is great for drum machine. Yes. Hard to beat a Joe Mox Alpha Bass and Erickson's Hex Drum for pure analog drum machine. I mean, if I was going to go pure analog drum machine, I would just get a Rhythm or use my Rhythm or use the TR1000. I do think both those drum machines are awesome, the Jomox and the Ericsson Sex Drum. No shame on them. I don't have any experience with them. I have experience with the other ones, so that's why I have that to say. But if I want to do analog stuff, probably just TR1000 for me. I think that's the big winner right now. Femto rage baiting sounds about right. I prefer to use a dedicated analog hardware mixer for compressor, EQ, and sidechain stuff like your SSL Pick 6. Now that's not gonna work for a lot of things though if you're doing production. Like you'd have to get the audio into your computer and send it back out to your mixer unless you have the dedicated outputs. Elektron doesn't offer that many dedicated outputs is one of the issues. That's why the sidechain stuff works best on the unit. Push 3 will take over the job of Octa and Tonverk. Maybe. Maybe. They got to keep working on that workflow on it, though. It's a little slow. Recently picked up a DN2 and you love it, but was so surprised there's no mod envelope. I'm sure it'll come. Actually, I'm not sure it will come, but I thought it would, and I hope it does, and I'm thinking it might. Tonverk is still too buggy. I don't know. Is that how other people feel? I don't feel that way. I haven't been coming across bugs. I'm looking for them. I use the Tonverk pretty often, and yeah. Still debating between DT2 and Tonverk. Brand new, so thanks for all your videos. Rock and roll. Here, let me answer it for you. Get the Tonverk if you want to do polyphonic stuff. If you want a synthesizer experience, kind of a synthesizer experience, get a Tonverk. You want a drum machine? Get a Digitakt. It's that easy. I mean, I'm not trying to be like a dick about it. I just mean it strongly. It's really that profound. But I promise I'm not trying to be a dick. I know everybody has wanting this for it, but Elektron really missed an opportunity with not making another OT. They're gonna make another OT. Just give it some time. They'll make another one. They have to, or I'm gonna just die. And we don't want me to die. I hope. The LFO designer? Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, here's a good point. Nice. Good job, Dirk2000. Durko? Durko. I like that name. Durko. Let's talk about the LFOs. They are different. The LFOs are different. So the modulation. We didn't talk about this. Okay. Multiple track types on the Octatrack. One track type on the Digitakt. And then we have multiple ways of using tracks on here. We do have different sequencer lanes on the Tonverk. We have a note lane, a parameter lock lane, and a notes and parameter locks lane, which is what you're used to using is the notes and the parameter lock lane. But you actually can address your sequences based on note or parameter lock so that you can specifically delete or adjust the parameter locks or notes while ignoring the other parts of the sequencer. And so you can see them separated in that way, which is cool and unique to the Tonverk. Only Tonverk has that. The Octatrack has multiple track lanes, as we saw, trigs, a slide sequencer, so it can do interpolated modulation between one trigger to another. Then it also has a swing sequencer, which is really weird and interesting, but cool. But you can adjust the swing. You can also hold function, adjust all your track swing this way. And then it has a recorder trig sequencer, which we looked at before. As far as modulation goes, on these boxes, on the Octatrack, we have 3 LFOs per track and an LFO designer, which you can substitute as one of your LFO shapes on any one of your 3 LFOs and borrow your LFO designer across any of your tracks. And this is a very interesting thing, the LFO designer, as you can do all sorts of weird stuff and make your own LFO shapes. Like I made this jagged thing. You can also use these LFO shapes and use them for like sequencing pitch of a sample. Like you can get pretty weird with these boxes. My brain's back. Can I just clear that out? Damn it. Let's just reload this part. There we go. Oh, I kept it in there. I guess it doesn't matter anyway. So it has a customizable LFO shape, and you can use that as your modulator. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. You can get really creative with it. You can make it be a gate where it's the beginning of the gate is 0 and the rest of it is all high, So you could create like a gates and triggers type idea that you would do usually in modular. You can build your own LFO. Cool. Only exists here. And also limited LFO options. Whereas on the Octatrack, when you go to parameter lock and LFO setting, you only have the depth and the speed as an option for you to parameter lock in your sequence. On the Digitakt and the Tonverk, as far as modulation goes, you can parameter lock everything about your LFO. The speed, the shape, the depth, the target on a per step basis. Same with the Tonverk. Can't do that here. So the LFO advantage here is only that the LFO can be connected to this controller, this fader, and that it has a customizable LFO shape. Otherwise, it is archaic compared to these two when it comes to modulation. The slide trigger is another thing that's special about the Octatrack, is it does interpolated values between one trigger and another, which is a smooth value change where it's counting perfectly across based on the length. That's what the interpolation would do. We don't have interpolated stuff on here, and we don't have it over here either. Although you can try and interpolate the velocity using this transform, ramp up, ramp down. That will interpolate it, mind you, in a very jagged and borderline useless way. But it will work, not in the same way that the slide trick does. The Digitakt, 3 LFOs. The Tonverk, 2 LFOs and a mod envelope, which can do cool stuff. I mean, it's just an envelope, but it's nice to have it be, you know, set up as an envelope. Envelopes can get reset and re-triggered on a per step basis. When this is turned on, it'll actually reset the envelope every time a trigger hits it, which is great. So it'll do in a decay or attack envelope, or, you know, whatever shape you're used to doing with an ADSR. And then it has 2 LFOs for your effects on a per track basis. Then when it comes to these other types of tracks, you have 2 LFOs for your effects. So it's a little different. It's very different than the Octatrack, and it's very different than the Digitakt when it comes to the modulation. So these units are quite different when it comes to modulation. But these two are the closest to compare with each other in terms of how does the modulation work on these boxes. These two are going to treat samples really well. If you modulate a sample, you're going to get a really nice return on investment with your modulation because it's so smooth. The sample rates are so much higher. So high on here, but pretty high over here. It's much lower here. And so modulating samples themselves can sound not as good. You just have less leverage in that regard to like moving a sample around with an LFO. Really good vibrato. Vibrato is even built in onto the multi-sample machine over here, which is cool. I'd like to see vibrato built in on every machine. I don't know why that's just not a thing all the time. So it's just an LFO for the pitch that you can turn on whenever you need to. Sounds like a great thing to have. So that's the difference between the modulation and all the boxes. So thank you for that comment that turned into a topic to discuss. Has anyone actually gotten around the mutes cutting off audio in some way? There is no way around it. You don't use the mutes. You use a fader controller and you just fade out your sound. That's how you get around it. There are no real bugs left, though. Yeah, I'm not... If you're talking about the Tonverk, I'm not sure what bugs it has. Syntax still has bugs? What are the syntax bugs? I don't know of any syntax bugs. Whoops. This is the broken chat window. Syntax is kind of the forgotten child. I don't think syntax will remain the forgotten child. I think that we'll see an update to the syntax. Elektron is not gonna just ignore the syntax. Mark my words. We'll see more for the syntax. It's not done quite yet. I am not impressed with the syntax that I tried out. Now, it depends on what you want, what you're trying to do. If you're looking for a sampler, get a DT2. I mean, when you pick up your comment is fair. Guitars and synths, it's a fair comment. But your comment also is like you picked up a Syntakt and you ended up with a DT Mark II. This is a really common thing that happens to so many people. You picked up a Syntakt because you wanted the sound of the Syntakt or because you wanted a machine to make music on. Now, and a Digitakt is a machine to make music on, but it's the sound of any machine. It's very different. It's a chameleon, right? Samplers are chameleons of music. They can be whatever you need them to be. They're a blank slate, whatever you want them to be. The Syntakt is a specific sound with a specific workflow that has a very limited sound engine in terms of like, it can't do all the sounds. It does the sounds that come in the box. You can't ever alter that or change that to be something other than what it does. And so this isn't just to you, guitars and synths. Like, I'm not calling you out or anything, like, because you didn't do anything wrong. But just in general, just as a topic, when you're after a groove box and you don't know what kind of music you want to make, you should get a sampler. If you know what you want to do, like say you're like, I know I want to make analog and digital techno, and I want to have the sound of analog drums, but I also need the flexibility of digital synthesizers, a Syntakt is what you're going to want. That's an argument for a Syntakt. Even has an analog filter. Does the sidechain thing with the envelope and stuff too, where you can route buses like I showed you on the Digitakt II. So it's got some really cool stuff, but it's like you gotta have the intention. The intention has to be there for that unit because it is unique in that way. A Digitakt II is just an easy pickup. So is an Octatrack. Honestly, and that's how a Tonverk is going to become. Any samplers are the best. I think samplers are the smart move for anyone. If you don't know what you want to do, get a sampler. Because it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. It just takes some effort, bit of learning. The most severe bugs right now is the LFO's inability to restart its phase. The unit's freezing while sampling as a master clock and the broken sequencer on the SuperTrack. I didn't know about those bugs. I'll have to check them out myself. Not that I don't believe you. I don't know don't know of them. Anyone else have their Tonverk crash after capturing a sample on 1.21? Definitely not. I mean, I haven't had my Tonverk crash in a long time. Oh, I'm in reception while you're live. Nice. Can make a box that's all three of these. That's true. But I wouldn't want that, honestly. Would I want that? Do I want one box to do all these things? Or do I want to compartmentalize my ideas so that I have a per function encoder? So if like, this is an interesting topic. So like you said Elektron could make a box that encapsulates all three of these. Technically, yes. It's called a computer can do it too. You already have it. You already own the box that can do all three of them. And you're watching me on it, your phone or your television or your computer. And the advantage of these boxes and them having this compartmentalization of what they do is that each button press on each one of these units reacts to a specific mode that the box is in and a specific idea that you're currently working on within that box. If I was to take all the ideas and pull them into one box, I would have an MPC, or I would have a live an Ableton Push 3. And I would have to argue with myself about what I'm doing right now, as opposed to knowing my Octatrack is doing performance effects and knowing my Digitakt is my drum machine and knowing my Tonverk is doing my melodic stuff. That is easy for me to just think about that and to approach them in that way. And when I press a button, it takes me straight to the window of the sound that I'm already listening to. And I know that. I know I can go over here and my drums are live and I can see all my drums in action. This is just like I would have to buy a huge MIDI controller and pre-map the crap out of it to any other box if I wanted to have all of this stuff in one box. I don't want that. I love this idea. I can pick and choose what kind of battle station I want. My battle station has an FM drum machine in it, a sampler, and a performance sampler, which is the Octatrack. And sometimes I pull in some other units on the side and I sample them into my Digitakt. And like, that's my battle station. Yours could be an analog rhythm and a Tonverk and an analog 4. Or it could be a Digitone 2 and a Syntakt and a Digitakt. You know what I mean? Like, that's a whole workflow, and you get to fall in love with each one of these boxes and learn them all deeply. And I like that. I think that that's actually really cool and a cool way to approach things. Fax tone. A new rhythm syntax combo would be cool. A new rhythm syntax combo? Because we already have the rhythm combo. It is the syntax. Maybe I don't understand. That wasn't an overreaction. I just need an overbridge for Tonverk, and I'm a happy boy. I think you'll get that. I can't imagine them not adding overbridge. Can you use a Digitakt as a live sampler like the Octatrack, but without the crossfader? No. There is a trick on the Digitakt where you can use a you can send transport but not clock. You can send a MIDI message to the Digitakt while you're playing live, and it will trigger the sampler in real time. And if that device is also clocked or synced, that you can do a live sample, but it won't, react in the same way. And it will also be normalized by default. You can't, so like the Octatrack, when you sample on the Octatrack, you can sample in Unity so that you have an identical copy of your sample. This is a really interesting topic in itself. When you're sampling on an Octatrack, you can make live resampled copies of your music. They're identical, Unity gain, no different than the sound of what you just heard. You record it, it's exactly that. Not louder, not quieter. You can do that on the Octatrack. That is not the case in the Digitakt. The Digitakt has a function called normalization, if you're not familiar with it, which will take your loudest peak of your sample and bring it up to the top of the headroom that it offers. So it'll bring it up to like -1 for your dB or something. It brings up all the other parts of the waveform with it. So it just makes it an overall louder sound. So basically it just makes the sound as loud as it can get within the unit. And that's normalization. Every normalization on every box has its own values that it chooses to normalize at. But when you sample something in the Digitakt, it's typically a little bit louder than when you sampled it because of the normalization process. So it's not the same as when you sampled it. You have to adjust it after the fact. So live resampling on the Digitakt will never be a thing, even if they added it, without them also adding the ability to have Unity gain on that live sample. So even if you try and trick it, it doesn't work. Same goes for the Tonverk. It normalizes its samples. That's just the way it is. I do think the multi-sampler maybe doesn't do that. I'm not sure if it does, but I don't think that it normalizes the samples. So if you record really quiet samples in the Tonverk, they will be quiet on the Tonverk. Whereas if you record a quiet sample on the Digitakt, it will bring up the ground floor along with that sample. So you might have a shh type sound along with your sample. Another interesting topic to discuss. Can you use the Digitakt as a live sample? Oh yeah, that would be a long stream, you're right. Amen. Know what you're making, know thyself. I agree. Weird, I haven't had an issue, I remember, but I probably just changed notes using the key. I don't know what that's referring to. All right, so how long have we been going for? Hour and a half. I think that's pretty good. Very quickly, this lovely stream is brought to you by Modbang. Modbang is my store, which we love, and I want to show you some live shows that are coming up and say thank you to all the people who support this channel. Give me 1 second, and then we can get back to talking for a moment. Let me see here. Oh yeah, this should work, I think. Where is it? Oh yeah, this will do it. That'll do. I swear to God. No, not that. Window. All right. Okay, cool. Here we go. Sorry, it's taking me a moment here. Hopefully you can still hear me. Cool. Today's stream is brought to you by Modbang. Modbang is my music store, but it's also where you can see live hardware electronic music events. If you like live hardware electronic music and you want to get involved, your city may have a Modbang event, or it may have another live hardware electronic music event in your city. But I have been a part of growing live hardware electronic music events in other cities. So they're in Chicago now, and they're in Portland, working on New York. They're here in Seattle. We have them in Ohio. We're growing all over the place. And this is a thing that I started with Jeremy Blake, aka Red Means Recording. The two of us started this a long time ago. It's kind of my baby. He helped me get it going. He's off doing his own thing still. But this is the thing that I've continued doing. And if you go to the website, modbang.com, you can go into the events page and check it out and take a look. We have an event coming up here in Seattle on February 24th. Mount Nowhere, Alpha Stream, Nilk, and Stacy's World playing, and there's always visuals. It's always hardware, no computers allowed, live hardware electronic music. You can always find out what's happening, maybe in your city. Here's another Seattle show. This is another Seattle. Portland has been a little slow on their updates lately. Thanks a lot, Portland. The shows are happening in Portland, though. Check the Modbang Instagram if you're curious about that. And if you also want to support this channel, you can visit my shop. Check this out. I designed this stuff. All these cables, these are MIDI LED cables like you see on the screen or like you see on my setup. And they light up when they're plugged in, and you can arrange your ins and out using these MIDI cables. And I love them, and I think they're dope, and I have thousands of them in my garage, so please buy them. These are my patch cables. They all glow in the dark. I designed the shape, the width, and the colors myself. All of this I designed myself. And for years and years, I have worked on this website and these products and these live hardware electronic music events. I've done this forever. I've put so much energy into this live hardware electronic music stuff. It is my mega passion. It's all I care about. It's all I think about. It's all I do. And I love it deeply, and I hope that you do too. And if you do love it as deeply as I do, consider supporting this channel by visiting patreon.com/EZBOT and signing up for the Patreon, or becoming a member of the YouTube channel, which is a paid service that helps support the channel, or visiting modbang.com and picking yourself up some MIDI or patch cables, and or visiting coffee.com and picking up my performance templates for the Elektron Octatrack, which I've spent an insane amount of time building, and I have a ton of them for you to check out. They're really fun. Otherwise, just hanging out, joining the Discord, which is completely free. There'll be a invite to the Discord in the comment section down below after I complete this stream, so feel free to join up. The only rules about being in the Discord is don't be a jerk and be friendly. It's a very inclusive and kind and highly skilled Discord with a ton of amazing musicians. Many of them you have seen on YouTube are there. And you can ask questions of anyone and pose your questions about Digitakt, Octatrack, Digitone, M8 Tracker, Deluge, TR1000. Everyone's talking, everyone's chatting. We've got about 4,000 members in the Discord, so please join, hang out with us. It's a great place to hang out. Very grateful for your support. Very grateful that I get to come here and hang out with you guys on stream, talk about these different boxes. I hope that today's hour-and-a-half lecture of me freewheeling on these three units and why you would pick one versus the other and where their strong points are helped you decide what you want to pick up. And if you do want to pick one of these boxes up, I do have affiliate links in the video description, and they support this channel big time. The people I do the affiliate stuff with, at no extra cost to you, give me a vast portion of how much they would make on their side. So it's kind of insane how nice they are with that for me. But if you do end up picking up one of these boxes, those affiliate links are great. They really help out the channel. Otherwise, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out. We've been here for about an hour and a half. I love you all deeply. I didn't drink any LaCroix today, so I'm very sad about that. I'm planning to go fix that right now. Pick yourself up a Digitakt. It's the best drum machine chameleon groove box you can pick up right now. Pick yourself up a Tonverk. It's an exploratory polyphonic synthesizer-esque experience. Super cool, very unique, great little groove box too. pick yourself up an Octatrack if you want to have the dark souls of electronic music and take your live performance, live resampling, live transitions, live effects, and macro effects to the next level for your music production. They're all super fun. They work really well together, and I love them deeply. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you next week.